To kick off today's celebration, we are fortunate to have Congressman David McKinley, PE of West Virginia, here as our opening speaker. Congressman McKinley was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2010, where he serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Before his run for federal office, Congressman McKinley was a West Virginia state delegate from 1981 to 1995, serving on the Finance, Banking, and Insurance Committee and Roads and Transportation Committee. Congressman McKinley has been a member of NSPE since 1972 and has served on the board of directors for the West Virginia Society of Professional Engineers. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Purdue University and spent 12 years in the construction industry before establishing his own professional engineering and architectural design firm, McKinley and Associates. Congressman McKinley.
What a group here today. My father's would just be very proud. He was at the Naval Academy, the class of 42. To see all these admirals, he used to talk often about he roomed with Admiral Zumwalt back in that era. But to see all these generals and admirals stand up, I'm honored to be here today, and I'm honored to be speaking to so many engineers. So thank you. Before I begin, I know one of the lessons I've learned in life is you don't do anything without introducing your wife. So Mary, Mary, there's nothing I've ever achieved anything without having Mary stand side by side with me, whether it's business ventures, running for political office, or getting involved in our community. She's just been outstanding, and I appreciate it. She's been a great mother for all of our children. So thank you all for having us here today. Let me start by congratulating all the nominees. I'm going to head back right after this, back to Wheeling. We came in last night to this, and I want to get back, but the opportunity to talk to a bunch of engineers, I don't get to do that very often anymore in Washington, but I just couldn't pass up the chance to be here to see the celebration and the achievement of what these fellows have done. But you know, when you think about the engineers, you think, how many other body groups have a comic written after them like we have with Dilbert, you know? I mean, I guess we just are a bunch of odd birds, aren't we, as engineers? But I'm so proud of what we do and what we can achieve when we take people's dreams and we make it reality. It's always very, it's very self-fulfilling for us for all in our profession. But I was at a science fair a couple weeks ago at WVU. And a woman came up to me afterwards after I'd made the address, and she said, "I can't believe you're an engineer." She said, "Because you're looking at me in the eye." And she said, "You've all heard that definition of, you know, the introvert engineer and the extrovert engineer. Maybe you haven't. The introvert engineer, when he talks to you, looks at his feet. The extrovert engineer looks at your feet." And I think, well, that's probably true. Yeah, it's probably true with it. But you know, you've heard some of the background to it at Purdue University and working my way through there and then being involved in the construction industry. That was back, I graduated from there in '69, back in a very interesting era. But back then, if you remember, I'm part of that group that we had to learn Fortran. We had to format our floppy disk. I wonder how many people in here even know what a floppy disk is, or a peanut computer that we used to have that IBM put together with it. The formatting for all of that. But what I've liked is how we've emerged with our firm is I try to lead it away from that to things like energy conservation and being out. And with our firm, we took it into LEED certification. That we'd built the first 3 buildings in West Virginia that are all LEED certified. And I think we're achieving something by doing that. I'm trying to take this message back here to Washington as well of what we can do as engineers to be able to achieve things that maybe are a little bit out of the norm with it. But one of the things that I've learned in those 16 years of being in the hinterland, of being out of politics, you heard I left back in '94 in the state legislature. But I'd reached the same point as many of you, the cynicism of the process, the frustrating, how you have to deal with so many people. Because as an engineer, I want to make a decision and move on it. But that's not the way it was. And I saw how many people across this country were being frustrated, so I got back in. And I'm pleased I'm here, but I'm one of only 2 engineers in Congress. Joe Barton is the only other one that from Texas, and we were sitting with our Texas boy over here, but Joe, and I've talked to Joe a little bit about it, and the role of the engineer. They kid me a lot about being an engineer. He said, you know, about the last 2 engineers we had, remember that was Herbert Hoover and Jimmy Carter. It's not a different era, folks, different era. We have a little different vision with it, and I am pleased about being able to serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, because there we're dealing with so many issues all across this country, from energy, healthcare, intellectual properties, manufacturing. It is the key assignment. And when they asked me about the committee assignment, they asked me, which committee do you want to work on? And I said, I want Energy and Commerce. And they said, we don't normally do that for freshmen. And I just looked them right in the eye and I said, I'm no freshman. This may be my first year in Congress, but after 45 years of being in private practice, I'm no freshman. Don't put me dealing with sand dunes on Guam. I want to work. And I wound up, they got my committee assignment. So now I have this opportunity to really deal with some of the energy and the manufacturing things that I want to be able to apply my engineering expertise, and it seems to be working with it. But I look back at how we got here, and I think back to the people when I served on the national board, the NSPE board. I think it was 77 to 80 or 81 back on that board. And back then we had real icons, and I'm sure they're still there that are on the board. People like Paul Pritzker out of Massachusetts, or Marvin Specter out of New York, Otto Tennant, Milt Lunch was our general counsel, and I would talk to him when we got away from it. But what they did, they inspired me to say that you don't just be an engineer and come to these meetings, one thing, but you have a responsibility in your community. And that's why I think I'm getting the gist of a little bit of these awards, that many of you have gone beyond the norm. You're doing something special. And I think that's what we need to be. And that's why I saw it on the NSPE board, where they challenge us to do more than just be engineers, be leaders. So it did mean a lot to me. But what we deal with now in Washington are a series of subjects that are very frustrating to me, because if you remember your code of ethics that we have as engineers, and one of the ones that I just constantly is on my mind is, engineers shall undertake assignments only when qualified by education and experience in the specific technical skill field involved. Now, look at the subject matter that we're dealing with in Washington and tell me whether or not the people that are dealing with our issues across America, leading our country into, are they technically trained to do this, to handle the subject matters that we're dealing with? Things like the National Energy Technology Laboratory that we have in Morgantown with the DOE. It is a powerful opportunity what that does with the engineers and the scientists there. But we have non-technical people that are calling the shots on the budget. And last year they slashed it $135 million, and this year it's even a higher amount than that. We were able to put that money back into the budget for them. Because if we're going to have, as a nation, energy independence, we've got to be able to have clean coal technology. When we're burning coal in West Virginia at a rate of 99% there, but 50% across the country, we need to have technical people and be able to keep a National Energy Technology Lab very sufficiently and trained and having equipped with the right people with it. When we're fracking for our shale gases that are going all across the country, when we're only getting 15 to 20% of the gas out of the ground, the National Energy Technology Lab and the engineers involved and the scientists involved in that are going to make us energy independent. We've got the issue of the Keystone Pipeline, and where people don't understand what it is. Talk to us as engineers to explain we're not going to have the problems that are being suggested by some of the environmentalist opponents. We have the issue of global warming being handled by politicians, lawyers, and real estate agents. Why aren't we dealing with global warming from a more scientific and engineering standpoint, where we can talk about things like the Milankovitch cycle? People that when I mention that, all of a sudden I see every time I do it, I watch their eyes glaze over. Isn't that a hoot when you see that about people when you're talking to them, you know you've just gone over their head? But we try to talk to them, and we're trying to find a way using that to deal with the global warming, but understand that we contribute to it as human beings, because every day we're exuding 2 pounds of CO2 every day ourselves. So when people ask us that question, of course we're doing it. It's man-made. But is it really? Is the whole issue really man-made, or should? When we talk about Milankovitch, you're talking about the three issues you're talking about: the global eccentricity, when we circum our orbit around the sun, the axis of the Earth up to 21 degrees, when that changes, or the precession, that global wobber as it goes around. So right now, they've predicted it. If you go back to look at what Milankovitch said, this is the type of climate we should be doing with, and you're going to see changes of it continue. So there are some real interesting parts where we can deal with it on a scientific level. We have the infrastructure and how we have to deal with the infrastructure. These are, who's handling that? Who's making these decisions? And they're non-engineers with it. But the one that I had the fun with was one of the committee members came to me from South Dakota, and she said, I'm having people, I've heard you speak, McKinley, and she said, I need some help. She said, how am I going to make people understand the farm dust bill? Farm dust bill, engineers is a great group to be able to talk to. The farm dust bill is they're fining farms all across America because it's 150 micrograms per cubic meter. And I turned to the committee after all the hearings were done. I said, how many of you even know what a cubic meter looks like? Let alone how many of you know what a microgram is, the weight of a microgram. So I asked them, it was a room probably about 4 times the size of this room. And I gave them something that they could relate to. I said, now, if that's the size of the room, equate that to 150. How much dust do you think that would be in a room that size? Some people said about the size of a person, maybe the size of a desk, table. You're getting it. You're getting it. It's the weight of this piece of paper. That's it. And I just dropped it like that to them. And they changed their mind. They're not going to do it now. But they need it for people in Washington that don't have the background, can't visualize it, to make sure we understand from the engineering what we're doing to society when we overregulate. Our engineers, all of you in this room, have a responsibility within your respective departments to make sure what comes down the pipeline makes sense, because it's part of our code of ethics to see that we're doing the responsible thing to our society with it. We've had the fly ash bill, and that's critical to us in West Virginia, and it should be critical all across this nation. I'm the author of that piece of legislation. I'm honored to be one of the freshmen to be able to get a bill passed. But that fly ash bill, we're creating fly ash in every one of the powerhouses in 48 of the 50 states. Every day we have fly ash, but we have the EPA suggesting that it might be considered a hazardous material. And you can imagine what will happen to our society if the fly ash we create when we burn coal to make electricity becomes a hazardous material. We can't allow that to happen. I could go on. My concern is with China. On that committee, when we're now every day in my office, we're getting a copy of the China Daily. When I see that reports talking about 2015, they're going to overcome us, they're going to match us with the economy, I want us to wake up as a nation and use our engineering expertise. Get our people where right now we only have 33% of our college students are in math and science, but yet we're competing against China and Japan at 55 and 65% respectively, competing with us on it. We're going to be challenged, and I love the challenge, but let's make sure we don't fall behind when we have that opportunity. So again, it's going to come down to us as engineers and our role with that. But this intrusion, we're trying to, the over-regulation is something that's happening all across America in our society. We're dealing with issues like I was at a powerhouse yesterday, and we were trying to work with them a little bit about how we can improve their technology, what we need to be done so that their heat rate of burning coal and creating that we can get it down to where we're more competitive with what they're doing in Europe. And I would like the Longview facility that just opened up at 8,500 BTU per kilowatt. That's the level we ought to be able to strive in. But we as engineers be able to keep pushing to make that thing happen. Otherwise, we're going to fall further and further behind. So I'll go back to that same point I made a minute ago. Who should be making these decisions? Lawyers, real estate, politicians, or do you want engineers? And frankly, I'll take the engineers. We may be a little goofy sometimes, and we're so damn conservative. Mary and I, we've chuckled so often about our kids that, you know, I've traveled, you know, being in a legislature or being involved in some of our projects. I'm always bringing back, you know, those little wafers of soap. I don't know. You, of course, wouldn't know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, right. I'll bet you there's a hairnet out there someplace. But my kids, when they finally graduated from college, never understood that a bar of soap's really big. It's not one of those little wafers that they were used to. Where, you know, some call us frugal. I'll take that with it. But we're, as engineers, we follow a logical plan. And that's why I think we've emerged as a nation, the exceptionalism that we've done over the years to see it. I see people pushing us to go further, and we should. And the U.S. engineers all across, you're the leaders. You 20-some that are going to get this award, I congratulate you again, because you're going to be the people that are going to lead our nation. You're going to keep pushing it. And I want you to get the next generation to do the same thing. We've got to find our ways for our children to get involved in engineering so that we again emerge. We're going to lead the nation again and out researching, out leading, be the power that we can be in this nation with it. So I'm frustrated with the process here. I see people that are not trained to do the things, to call these decisions. It's much like, I guess you could say, is who would hire a painter to put the electrical wiring in their house? And you think about it, you wouldn't do that, but yet that's how Congress works. People that have no expertise are calling the shot on global warming. They're calling the shot on the EPA regulation. They're calling the shot on farm dust legislation. Let's make sure that we as engineers speak up and do our job. So with that, I'll close with it that I'm very proud to be an engineer. I make sure it's on my plaque outside my door, and people wonder, what in the world is that? But I make sure they all hear the story when they come inside, because we as engineers have a role, and I'm proud to be in your midst here today, because I want to be someone that you can look back and say that you've got a voice. There are very few of you out there can vote for me, but I can vote for all of you. Thank you very much. God bless all of you.